From religion to wrestling, gumbo to grits, politics to poetry, and all things Southern in between, this is Take on the South. Produced by the Institute for Southern Studies and hosted by the College of Arts and Sciences at the University of South Carolina, Take on the South examines the highs and lows of the American South, examines the truths and fictions of the country's most distinctive region, and picks the brains of some of its most accomplished students. To understand the South, you need to take it on, and that's what we'll be doing. Join us as we take on the South.
Hi, listeners. Welcome to Take on the South, the podcast of the University of South Carolina's Institute for Southern Studies. I'm one of the hosts, Ebony Toussaint, and I'm excited to share with you one of my conversations about comic books and Southern folklore. Our guest for this episode is John Jennings, a professor of media and cultural studies at the University of California at Riverside. Jennings is a co-editor of the Eisner Award-winning collection, The Blacker the Ink, Constructions of the Black Identity in Comics, and Sequential Art. Jennings is also a 2016 Nazir Jones Hip Hop Studies Fellow with the Hutchins Center at Harvard University. Jennings' current projects includes the horror anthology Box of Bones, the coffee table book Black Comics Returns with Damian Duffy, and the Eisner-winning Bram Stoker Award-winning, New York Times best-selling graphic novel adaptation of Octavia Butler's classic dark fantasy novel, Kindred. Jennings is also founder and curator of the Abrams Megascope line of graphic novels. Thank you for joining us today on Take on the South, John. So after all of that, can you tell me a little bit about your work and how you came to pursue media and cultural studies?
Okay, well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's always a great pleasure to talk to folk about the South, because a lot of times people have a particular notion about like the American South, particularly like the Black American South. And as you know, a lot of my work is entrenched in reconfiguring those conversations and actually like exploring those aspects. So as far as like how I ended up in media and cultural studies, it's because I got tired of teaching kids how to like manipulate people. And so what I mean by that is, my previous, I wasn't always a media and cultural studies professor. I was a graphic design professor for like almost 20 years. So I started teaching like right out of grad school. I was 27 at my first post, and I was teaching at Jackson State University, the sonic boom of the South, right? So that's my alma mater, actually. And I pretty much started their graphic design program, actually, when I was there. I was there for like 4 years, and got them accredited when I was there, and also ended up redesigning their curriculum while I was there too. So, just to kind of be more, up to date. And so I was there for a little bit, and then I went to University of Illinois, and I taught there for 8 years. That's where I got tenure at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, where I also went to grad school. So the first two posts is just me popping around to my two alma maters, and then there's a long story there. But yeah, when I was there, I actually worked in, I taught graphic design. I was in charge of their image making program, which is like image making essentially is like applied semiotics, and for those out there listening, like semiotics is a subset of linguistics where it focuses on symbols and visual communication. So essentially what I was doing, I was teaching graphic designers techniques for selling products. I mean, yes, design is a human endeavor that we've done since the age of humanity, but we've commodified everything now, right? So, most of my students were going into marketing or, working for huge advertising firms. I mean, closest big city is Chicago. I taught at the main campus in Champaign, but Chicago is an advertising mecca. So most of these students were going into like packaging design. This is around the same time as the boom as like, app design and stuff, this kind of thing. So after a while, I'm like, well, teaching image led me to believe, led me to know like there's a lot of things I don't know about symbolic communication. So I ended up studying like cognitive theory and like, women and gender studies, like critical race theory. I started bringing in a lot of other types of seeing into my artwork. And the more I saw, the less I wanted to make that type of work. And so what I started doing was becoming an extremely interdisciplinary scholar, So instead of doing like, writing a book about something, I might create an art show about a particular subject, that kind of stuff. So I became more of a critical, what they call a critical maker, right? Which comes out of the industrial design parlance. So basically what happens is you do research on a project, and it's in-depth research, but you don't necessarily create a scholarly, technically a traditional scholarly work. You do like a prototype of some kind. You make something that actually responds to the problem, because design is problem solving. We don't just make logos, we actually solve problems. Most times they have a visual component to them. Anyway, so that's how I ended up there. So I started Buffalo. From there, I went to University of Buffalo. I taught there for 6 years in graphic design. Their program was a lot more experimental and a lot more theoretical. And so I got a chance to really, really spread my wings theoretically. I really enjoyed teaching there, actually. But while I was there, they started to try to like push me into admin. And I was like, I'm an artist. I don't want to be telling people what to do. And that's terrible. Yeah, so I got recruited by Nalo Hopkinson, the Jamaican Canadian science fiction and fantasy writer, my friend. Yeah, she was here at University of California, Riverside in creative writing, and we became really good friends. And so we were working on a project together. She brought me out to do a talk, and at the time there was a vice chancellor there that saw me speak and made it his business to hire me. He was like, we got to get this dude at our school. So that's how what happened. And so my wife hated Buffalo.
Who wouldn't
And
trade California, for
yeah,
Buffalo,
yeah.
New York?
And she's from Chicago, but she was like, how people from Chicago, Chicago, the best city, even it's better than Paris and whatever. It's Chicago, Chicago. So we were up in Buffalo and she's like, look, I'm gonna give this like 3 years, right? And if something don't change, you're gonna have to go on the market and you're gonna find another job, which is what I did. So she was like, I can't do it. And so I was like, I went back on the market. I had like 6 job offers actually. And that was the one that actually felt like home to me. Like, so media and cultural studies is a bunch of people who used to be in different spaces and they basically became like they were like me, where they were like, they're makers of some kind, they're scholars of particular, and they are butting heads with like the department that they're in to a certain degree. So they migrate here. So media and cultural studies is extremely eclectic and very political. I call us beautifully angry professors.
Love that framing.
Yeah, because they are like some of the smartest people I've ever met in my life, actually, like just ridiculously brilliant. And, you know, uh, I look around the table, it's like being in the Avengers to a certain degree.
This is incredible. Is this a pitch for everyone
No,
to
no,
come to UC
it's no,
Riverside?
it is. I love the department a lot, and we have really strong students and stuff. And yeah, so that's how I ended up in media and cultural studies. So I teach courses on Afrofuturism and aesthetics. I'm currently teaching a class that I've been teaching for a while. It's my favorite one actually, is Afrofuturism and the Visual Cultures of Horror right now.
Ooh.
Yeah, and then also I teach a course on comics and contemporary culture. So it's like an intro to comics as a medium. And the other one I teach is Afrofuturism and the politics of the Black superhero. So it's all like Luke Cage, the Falcon, Misty Knight. Yeah.
Wow. Meteor
Yep.
Man, my favorite. He's my favorite.
I know Media Man, I don't teach Media Man, but I need to revisit it because I haven't watched that film in a long time, honestly. And like I said, I found out recently because of the book I'm working on for Marvel on their Black superheroes. I'm working on a book, me and my friend Angelique Roche, we're working on a book about all of their Black superheroes, right?
No, this is
That's what Ghostlight came from.
you heard it here first. He resurrected Ghostlight for Marvel, and now we're working on a book, a compilation of all of Marvel's Black
That
super.
was their first. Yeah, it's called My Superhero is Black. It's we've been working on it for a while actually. It came before Ghostlight. And
I love that. My president is Black. My superhero is Black.
see the thing is like you get right. Because just as an aside, someone just posted this, just our book cover on like one of those like fan sites and stuff, and there was so much like virulent, like ignorant racism against just the cover, right?
Oh,
Just the title. It was so toxic. I was like, wow. So it's just a history book, people. It's just a
just
history book, you know. But yeah, but that's exactly what they riff. So they were riffing off of Ta-Nehisi Coates, who was riffing off of Young Jeezy, right?
right.
Right. Yeah. So
I mean, we all
that.
had that song blasting that day. I mean, everybody.
Yep.
So you talked a lot about your roots and throughout your work and as well as your bio, you're very vocal about your roots in Mississippi and the South. So
Yeah.
you went from Mississippi to Illinois, then to
Mhm.
New York, and now California. And
Yeah.
so how are you incorporating Southern elements in your work? Do you plan to return to the South, Jackson State? But you said California feels like home. Is it just that media and cultural studies feels like home?
Well, they say home is where the heart is, right? And I this is where my wife and family are right now. My little boy is born here. He's very California, as we were discussing earlier. And I don't know. I mean, actually, right now I'm trying to secure a position as a visiting artist at the museum at the Mississippi Art Museum in Jackson. So I will, and I always actually go back. I feel like Prometheus sometimes. Like I actually go and I'll bring back fire, right? So like for instance, after going to graduate school, because when I went to undergrad there, our program it was severely underfunded. This is before the Ayers case where they talked about all of the black schools in Mississippi being underfunded and how it was unconstitutional. And so all the black schools got like a huge influx of cash. Jackson State used it very well, actually. Hired some really strong faculty, did like a lot of acquisition of land and actually expanded, did a really great job. So it's like a gym in the middle of Jackson. It's pretty amazing. So when I was there though, the budget for our graphic design for our art department was probably less than what you get back for your taxes. It was so bad.
Yikes.
I was like, wow.
Was there
Yeah,
a number of faculty or?
it was just not like it. So it wasn't a lot of art majors there. I think we had about when I first started there, I think we might have had like maybe 10 art majors or something like that. And then once I left, it was like 10 times as much, because we had to build out the program, and update it. And
That's
so
good to hear, especially a lot in the SEC. We talk a lot about Ole Miss, and they have one
yeah,
of the best like Southern studies,
right.
programs in the nation, not just even in the South.
Exactly. Or the fact like University of Mississippi had well, Ole Miss is University of Mississippi, right? Yeah, I'm like, yeah, right. Yeah, yeah, they actually have their press is like the best place for comic studies, actually.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah,
Wow.
yeah. Actually, there's a book on me. They published a book about my conversation. It's called Conversations with John Jennings, so they have a whole section on just like, relatively
I wonder
famous.
what the history is, though, in comparison to Jackson State. So similar to how we have University of South Carolina, we have South Carolina State here in Claflin, a number of other HBCUs here.
Yeah.
Be interesting to learn more about that
I
history.
really would, yeah, I'm sure someone is already studying that and writing a book about it, right? But yeah, so I really took the knowledge that I got at University of Illinois and brought it back and actually like use it to ignite a new program. I even designed their logo for the school actually for that whole thing. So it was just like, I was doing like a lot of like community building and stuff when I was there too. Like I worked a lot in the community and with like local festivals and things of that nature. And yeah, so it was an amazing time to be back home. But I realized that my own research, my own hunger for knowledge was suffering because I was working so much. I was teaching like a god awful, like so many classes. And we didn't even have money for like lab monitors for our computer lab. So I was the lab monitor. So I was working like 12-hour days and stuff like that. It was insane. So something had to change. And so I ended up I stayed in touch with my mentor, Rob Springfield, at U of I. He became chair and he realized that he actually could hire me. So he actually brought me back as faculty. So, but when I was there though, I was always thinking about how I could actually like inspire stuff at Jackson State. So I actually did a really big like art show there while I was at University of Illinois on Black superheroes. Me and my friend Damian Duffy, who have been doing the because we started off as curators, me and Damien, who, we're doing the Octavia Butler books now, but we started off as like comic scholars doing work.
The
And so,
dynamic duo. You both have very alliterative names as well. Damien
that's
Duff,
right.
John
Actually,
Jennings.
our call sign is J2D2. He designed like a little robot.
Nerd.
Yeah, because we're nerds. We're such nerds. Yeah. So yeah, so we ended up doing like a lot of that kind of work. And so after that, me and Stacey Robinson, who's from the north, he's from Rochester. No, is it Rochester? He's from upstate New York. But he
Somewhere
spent
up
a lot
there.
of time in North Carolina. So he has a very southern kind of a aspect to him. So we created this thing called Black Kirby, which was kind of signifying on Jack Kirby, of course, and so for the last decade or so we've been doing work. But our first show was at Jackson State, you know. So the other thing too is then when we created this program called me and Rico Chapman created this thing called Planet Deep South, which was looking at like Southern futurisms and actually like reclaiming Afrofuturist roots for the South, you know? So the first one was at Jackson State. So basically, what we've been trying to do is actually, I always try to come back, and also I did a show there called Thief at the Crossroads, which was looking at like blues and technology. So I always go back and do something in that space whenever I can, you know. But as far as like moving back, I'm not really sure yet. We'll see. We shall see. But
But I love that. Even the thief at the crossroads, of course, my brain, the way it is wired, thought the crossroads demon like immediately.
well, yeah, it's riffing off of you know, this of course, you know, like you said, the Robert Johnson mythology, but also there's a film called from John Confer from England, and it's called The Last Angel of History. And it starts out with them talking about this thing called a data thief that actually travels through time and reconnects like Black history. But it's a documentary about electronic music, Black electronic music. But he references the blues as a Black secret technology. And so this actually started me thinking really differently about like technology and what that actually means. And we're talking also ancestral technologies, which leads me, of course, to conjure and hoodoo and
Yeah.
different ways of knowing. So for instance, I actually created this term called conjure punk, actually, which fuses like root work with cyberpunk. So so
Ah,
so instead of like something that's electronic or you know, imagine something that's powered by ancestral energy instead of like, you know,
yeah, like everybody says the Black Panther and the heart-shaped herb, but like in Gullah
yeah,
Geechee culture, we have life everlasting, and I've heard it referred to as like our sort of like
yep.
heart-shaped.
Yep. As soon as I saw the heart shaper, I said, "Oh, root work.
Root work,
They're doing
yeah,
some root doctoring." Yeah.
conjuring.
You know, another
And they're going to the ancestral plane and
that's
kind of
right. They're
bringing some of
literally
that.
like ingesting it and traveling to another like ancestral dimension. Yeah, it's very powerful. Another thing I talk about too is like people forget this. You've seen the film Blade, obviously, because you're a big nerd and love horror, right? You've seen Blade. You remember where he gets his serum from?
No, I don't.
Yeah, because people forget this because they're like, oh, he's killing vampires.
Right.
One of the most important things to me is his connection to the Black community. Because what happens is when he goes to get his serum that stops him from turning into a vampire, a blood-sucking vampire monster, he goes to the same place that you buy dashiki and some shea butter. He goes to a bodega. Think about it. Go back and check it out. Goes back to like it's
I'm
like a
gonna
bodega.
have to.
And he grips up this brother, you know, who's in African garb. He has like, it looked like he might even have like a charm or something, you know what I'm saying? Or like a
Like an
that
amulet or
maybe an
something.
amulet or something. Yeah,
Nice.
but he has a similar haircut, like his hair is cut in a style, kind of like how Blade has that pattern in his hair.
Yeah.
He gives him the serum and he grips him up like, yo, brother, thank you. You know, like that
Oh,
kind
like
of thing.
the
Yeah,
iconic
he daps him
dab.
up.
Yeah, not a
Yeah, he daps
handshake,
him
but
up.
the
He daps
yeah.
him up and he hugs him, you know, like he knows him really well. And so Blade has a community in that movie. Like it's a very Black film, right? And then you notice that the more successful is, the more they remove the Black out of out of those. By the time you get to the third one, which is a hot mess, Blade's barely in it.
Nobody
And
even talks
also
about
too, the
it.
loss of like Mbouche Wright, you know, who was a fantastic character that they did not bring back, but they're gonna bring back Whistler. Anyway, never mind. But
No,
so
Blade's iconic for several reasons. We talk about how it
yeah,
launched the Marvel universe forward
yep.
into what it
They
is
do too.
today.
They do too. The official, if you look at the official accounting of the Marvel history of Marvel Universe, they do credit Blade with that, by the way. So that's actually not just like hearsay, right? It actually is like,
Right.
yep, that was the first successful film in that new era. Yep. Anyway, all right, but that's me. That's what obviously I'm a big nerd and I talk about comics and all this kind of stuff. But I have a whole section just talking about like, you know, Black Southern conjure work, actually. In fact, we're coming up on it pretty soon in my syllabus.
I love that. I have to tune in for that lecture. So kind of going into, you did a perfect segue into conjuring roots and herbs and how you tied in all of this into Blue Hand Mojo. So
Yes.
can we talk about some of that, and maybe how do you explain your use of hoodoo and conjuring, or how do you define these terms that may not be common to our listeners?
Well, so the thing is, again, I came up in the South, Mississippi. I grew up in a very agrarian space, and now that I've, you know, looking backwards, sometimes it actually gives you more clarity, right? And so, I was raised by my mother and my grandparents. I grew up with and I spent a lot of time with my grandfather and my grandmother, right? Both of which, were like not necessarily educated in like the traditional fashion, right? My grandfather never went, he started school, never finished. So, he actually could not read or write. And then my grandmother had a fourth grade education, but both of them were forced to like drop out and take jobs and start taking care of their family and stuff, right? So yeah, my grandfather literally signed his name with an X. It was almost like, that kind of stuff. So this is so I came up hard, came up pretty like, poor in that space. But, we didn't know because we always had food in our stomachs. We had like, a large garden full of all kinds of vegetables. My grandmother was always putting up stuff for the winter. So
Canning,
yes,
preserves, yes.
canning preserves. Yeah, exactly. I have a story called Preserves I'm working on, by the way. It's terrifying. Anyway, so
I'm just gonna read everything you've ever written because it's just
because I put
Southern and it's amazing.
I put the South in everything I do. So and it's because, I was raised by these two very strong women, and my mother was she dropped out of school at Alcorn State University in Mississippi. She was an English major, but she got pregnant with me, and those times were different, what I'm saying? So she dropped out of school, moved back in with my grandmother. There was an estrangement there that was really tripped out. I could always sense. But but I was raised with love, and I was like really interested in like, I mean, I was in the woods. So I was like, collecting crickets and like playing with like fireflies and, climbing trees, like a lot of climbing trees actually. And then also like a lot of running through thickets barefoot. Like it's crazy. Like it was like some Steinbeckian, style fantasy. You know what I'm saying? And I
Yeah.
was like laying on, and I would be on the top of barns. I would climb barns and lay on the top of barns and look at the sky, and imagine and look at the constellations. I was very much into like stargazing and stuff like that. And my grandmother would tell me stories, and she spoke of haints and spooks and
Mm.
mystical things in the woods, and my mind would wander, but she also had these sayings like covering mirrors and stuff, and all these different things that were like I know now are connected to a particular cultural origin that's connected to like diaspora, but also I feel like I can't prove this, but I feel like that she got some of that from the Gullah people. Like she might even been like Gullah and I didn't even realize it or something. I don't know, but I know that it's very localized. But there were some of the sayings and some of the things, and we had like I grew up with like bridles on the doors and and horseshoes over the doors to
Any
protect
of the
us.
Haint Blue or Indigo? Did you see
Very
any
much so.
bottles
Very
in the
much so.
trees?
No bottle trees. So but Haint Blue definitely like almost
That
every
sounds
house.
very Gullah Geechee to me. Honestly, a
That's what I'm
lot of
saying.
people didn't really know. Like, we didn't grow up calling ourselves Gullah Geechee. So I didn't know until, like you said, you look back and you're like, oh,
Yeah.
wait, yeah, we did do this. We did grow up. We
Yeah.
did say these things and share these different cultural beliefs and traditions and language. And you don't really realize it too also until you go away and you're like, oh, wait.
Oh, I see it now.
There.
Yeah. Yep. And so that's the thing. And so my mother was a huge, like yourself, like your kids are so lucky that their mom is so much into fantasy and science fiction and horror and stuff like that. They're gonna have a really great time growing up, right? So that's what happened with me. Like my mom is she's still a massive like consumer of like horror and action movies and
Wow.
and she bought me my first comics, and she got me into horror and the sci-fi and stuff like that. Like we would read stuff together. Like she had subscriptions to like, Alfred Hitchcock magazine, and like, she'd had subscriptions to like stuff like Omni, stuff like that. She was really into, yeah, seriously. And so and she had a lot of her own books from college still, and she was a huge fan of Edgar Allan Poe's work, actually. So I became a
I
fan of
love
Edgar.
your mom. That's
Yeah,
like my favorite. Like, I have
yeah.
ravens all in here.
Have
Like,
you seen the Netflix? You probably haven't. The Netflix
of
show.
course I have. It
So
is
good. It
incredible.
was incredible. Yeah, I was like, man. So yes, I'm a bit. I was, and so we would go
And
to
he's
the.
Southern, so we have his entire like works in our McNair Reading Room in the Institute for
That's
Southern
right.
Studies
He
because
is
he's from
Southern.
Maryland, so
From
Maryland
there.
is technically it's
Yeah,
not
that's
deep
right.
South, but it's South.
But it's still South, exactly. Yeah. No, and so and his work was so similar to like formation of like popular culture actually too, because he was a huge influence on H.P. Lovecraft as well. Who influenced like so many other writers after him, even though he was like super racist, but never mind. So like super duper racist. But yeah, it was like prototypically xenophobic. It was crazy. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, so that's where I started. So so you imagine like a kid like me, and I actually started drawing like really early, like probably even before I could actually like write, I was drawing something, you know. So so you imagine someone with where I'm a storyteller, you know. So I was looking at stars, finding stories everywhere. My grandmother is telling me about ghosts and haints and you know, superstitions that I thought were like bogus, and I would go and look them up. I lived in a library, you know, and then my mother, was this woman who was through conspicuous consumption probably expressing herself through the things she was consuming, you know. And so, I would go to the library and check out like the Shadow, on LP, like the old Shadow serial that
Wow.
that Orson Welles did. So I was a huge
Wow.
yeah, so I was consuming a lot of media, and then also too, what's crazy is that I don't know what librarian bought Asterix for our school library, but we're talking about in the middle of Mississippi, somebody bought several collections of like Asterix from like was it Netherlands? I think is what it is.
Oh,
What is it?
wow.
Yeah, yeah.
You're
Asterix
right,
is
in the middle of Mississippi. Yeah.
Mississippi. I'm like, who bought this? And I was like, and I love them.
I'm embarrassed to say the first book that my aunt was a second grade teacher
Yeah.
in Beaufort, where I'm from. And so I spent much of my like elementary school years with hanging out in her classroom or going across to the Beaufort County Public Library. And so one of the first books I wrote my weekly required report to her on was Sabrina the Teenage Witch.
Yeah, see?
So I read like a lot
Watching.
of those books and and now of course I've come across Chaos, The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina.
Mm-hmm.
But I
Mm-hmm.
also read like the Goosebumps series. And
Yep.
so even seeing that series on Disney, I don't know if you've seen it,
I
but
haven't watched it yet. Is it
it's
good?
very well done.
Oh, I gotta check it out. I
Very.
just watched actually, which I really enjoyed. I'm actually teaching it because it just moved me so much. Was the new Haunted Mansion, actually.
Oh,
I
with
enjoyed it.
Lakeith.
The one
Yes,
with Lakeith Stanfield and Rosario Dawson. Yeah, I found it very good. I
it
enjoyed
was
it.
very well done. I mean,
Yeah,
I
I
love
was like,
Lakeith though, so I'm biased.
yeah, yeah, I would love, yeah, because I haven't seen the Changeling yet, though. I want to see that. That's Victor LaValle's TV show that's on Apple. It's based on his Victor LaValle's work. He's a very talented black horror writer, actually.
Ooh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, yeah.
Adding to the list.
Yeah, you should check his stuff out. It's very good.
There
Sorry,
like
we
a
went.
black horror club, Southern Gothic club. I gotta join it.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, what I'm trying. So I have a lot of things that I'm have in place right now. Me and my friend Courtney Baker really kind of kickstarted this thing I wanted to do called Scary Black Folks, right? And so it's just like kind of I wanted to be a collective of like black horror creators and theorists
Oh.
and have us kind of play together and talk together. My dream, though, is to create a black horror convention of
I
some
was
kind.
gonna say Black Horror Con. I was there. I was
Yeah.
like, wait, I'm not a critical maker, but I'm a fan.
Yeah, yeah. So I want to create that's my dream is but me and Kenitra Brooks actually had one lined up at the Amistad Center in New Orleans
Oh my gosh. This is
pre-COVID.
like my heart. Like, where was all of this when I was a weird kid in the middle of the Sea
But
Islands?
now you get to be a weird wife and mom and scholar, right?
I know,
A
right?
scholar,
Tag them
wife,
along.
mother,
Come
and
on with
scholar.
me to Black Horror Con, boys. Let's go.
Yeah, yeah, let's go. Exactly. So now it's a whole different thing, right? So because Kenitra is like that too, we met. Like she was actually in a similar way. Like when we finally met, I had just kind of theorized the idea of the ethnogothic, right? Where I was thinking about like using gothic horror to unpack trauma and move into the Afrofuture. Because I was looking at stuff like, for instance, like Kindred, for instance, it could be considered Afrofuturist, but it actually has gothic tropes, right?
mean, look at this. I'm just telling you, I have all of your work. Like, so
Thank you.
it's just incredible.
Well, I'm working on talents right now. I'm drawing it, so I'm getting ready to color it soon, hopefully. So yeah, I'm working. It's been a long time coming, but we're working on Parable of Talents next. So
I mean, take your time. I mean, the images
oh, I
already.
can't take my time. I gotta get it done. I can't live in her world. I can't live in that world as long as we have. Like I was just drawing like, me and David Brame are doing the artwork on it, and it's traumatic, man. It's so dramatic. I was like, oh my God.
Is there parts of your creative process, like what you're speaking of in terms of Afrofuturism and bringing like elements from the diaspora and of course like our conjuring? How do you take those breaks since you are weaving in very real elements of our
I
culture?
mean, I just rest. I mean, I kind of try to get I use it's funny because like drawing is work, but drawing is therapy as well. Because I love drawing. I love it. And so I do it too. I do like these days I've been doing like meditative drawing. I've been drawing like these little star monsters. They kind of,
Meditating little monsters,
they're
monsters.
kind of ador yeah, they're kind of adorable, but also terrifying. Like us, like human beings. We're beautiful, but also terrifying. What's the Bible verse? I am both beautifully and ter was it terribly and beautifully made? I'm jacking up the
Oh, fearfully and wonderfully
fearfully and
made.
wonderfully made. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, that's it. Yeah. See, thank you. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
Horror and
Hallelujah.
hallelujah. I mean, that's
Yeah,
all
there's
through
some
this house,
scary stuff
right?
in the Bible, man. The Bible's terrifying.
Oh
Nephilim?
yeah, you
Oh
should
my
draw
God.
one of the angels description from the Bible.
Yo, listen, I don't know why I want to mess with that. That's scary. Anyway, so I think for me, like because my mom and I, and this is just me just postulating, there's so much joy in us like when we would like watch horror movies together and discuss them. Like, did that scare you? Like, nah. Was that silly? Oh, that monster was, it would be stuff like that. We would unpack. Little did I know we were doing criticism. We'd just be having fun, but we would actually criticize in a movie, right? So I guess that aspect of like trying to understand like these connections is something that actually comes through in the art. And so I've always been trying to figure out ways to unscarify blackness, you know what I'm saying, to actually like take away the terror, and have people understand it differently, you know what I'm saying? Because essentially what we're doing is folk horror, but it's black folk horror, right?
Ooh, folk
Yep.
horror.
Yes,
Ooh,
folk horror. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So there's a great documentary on it, by the way, on Shudder. It's so good. But there's a whole section. Do you know the work of Maisha Wester?
I don't.
Listen, first of all, Maisha Wester is a genius. First of all, she's on
If
a
you
she's
set up the Black Horror subscription in convention, I will be
Listen, I want
subscriber.
to do it so badly. It's like where I'm trying to figure out like what partner. Right now, I have to talk to. Oh shoot, I was supposed to talk to Clint Fluker. Dang it. Sorry,
Oh
I
no.
just I just got a note. I was like, dang it. Yeah, so me and Clint Fluker, who actually also came in with me and Rico and started. We did another like really big like festival around futurity in the South called Planet Deep South, and we did it again. And this is when he was still with the AU, in Atlanta. And so
Yeah.
he actually, but now he's at Emory. And so Clint is a brilliant scholar too, really talented artist, but also like just a blindingly smart theorist and curator. Actually, he's in charge of the African American collection at Emory. Now. And so he's a good friend, and we literally like chat all the time, like constantly. So we want to do something like maybe this will be in Atlanta, but I really want to do something around horror. That'll probably be the last big thing I want to do because I've actually co-founded at least 3 or 4 Black comic book conventions around the country. That's my side. That's what I do. I'm like a Johnny Appleseed of Black conventions.
I mean, that's incredible. I don't know how you find the time, but your career, I mean, your awards, everything's incredibly dynamic. Wife, child, like you have it all. You're doing it all. But I love that you don't forget the South and
I
who you
don't.
are and keeping those elements in. I think is just super important. And it's inspiring and it's definitely impactful, your work. And just even hearing you talk so much about your mother and your relationship. And so it's definitely inspiring to me in
Yeah.
my relationship with my sons and how
Mhm.
I tell myself I have to maybe not introduce so much of this part of myself to them right now. But
Yeah,
like
maybe.
you said, my oldest is sitting there. He's like, oh no, that zombie went in there. Oh, he chopped his head off. And I'm not thinking he's getting these things yet, but you're right. He's critiquing it. He's like, why did he
Yes.
go in there?
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah. Yes, it's a critical. Yeah, you think critically, and so about stories and stuff like that. And I like the idea of realizing that we're not monstrous. You know what I'm saying? And so when I see stuff like Lovecraft Country, or I look at things like, oh, even with Spell, even though like Spell is cool. Did you ever see Spell, the Hoodoo? It's with
oh,
Mari Hardwick, and yeah, it reminds me of the
oh,
Skeleton
what-
Key.
Megan Good? No, no, no.
Was Megan Good in that? No, that's Venom.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, the one with the rattlesnakes in the suitcase.
Okay. You said to spell. I feel like we
It's
said
called Spell. Yeah, yeah. So
okay. So I think
it's
he's my husband's fraternity brother, and I think he mentioned the movie to me and said he thought I'd like it, but I haven't.
it was a fun it was cool because one thing I did like about it is that it showed that conjure can be done with both hands. You know what I'm saying? So it could be
Hmm.
harmful, or it could be healing, or it could be protective. You know what I'm saying? Because actually, like 95%, I would even say, like conjures like to heal. Like root work is really more about like
Hmm.
healing. right?
Say more about that. So I think
Yeah.
there may be a misconception for people who aren't familiar with mojo working or root work that it's
Yeah.
more harmful, but you're talking about healing.
Right, right. No, so I think what ends up happening is like, first of all, anything that's not Judeo-Christian, westernized is the devil, right? So when I think about the story of the crossroads, well, I'm like, well, that's not a devil. That's probably Eshu Allegra. It's probably Papa
Mhm.
Legba, because he's the lower of the
Papa
crossroads.
Legba, yes,
And
yes.
and or it could be Kalfu. And if it's cow food, then maybe that's not a good thing. Because because cow food's thing is he's the opposite, right? He'll let things happen that are bad to teach you a lesson,
Hmm.
that kind of stuff, right? So and he's a master of black magic. So maybe it's cow food. I don't know. But that's that crossroads story though, we look at it as like, oh, it's the devil and he's gonna get your soul, right? That kind of thing, right? And so we have these, so you're conflating like African belief structures, Afro things with African diaspora with like a Judeo-Christian belief structure. It's literally a crossroads, it's an intersection of these different things, which is what we are because we're African people in America, right? And so we brought these stories and things with her, these remixing and things. These are stuff that we've already do. Like, African belief structures have always been extremely syncretic. So of course, like a lot of these beliefs came over with the slaves from like, other places and became like a huge gumbo, if you will, of different belief structures. So it makes sense that something like conjure would kind of originate in like a Louisiana space, right? Or like in these different southern pockets, where you would have people who were conjurers or shamans or wise people that knew connections to the spirits who were brought over and survived the Middle Passage and would bring this knowledge with them, and then it would be uh, churned up with like other belief structures, right? Or they would, a lot of things that people who do conjure will replace things. Like if you don't have a particular root, you say, oh, well, this is a similar root, so I'll actually use that instead. That happens a lot too, that replacement. So I was like, okay, well, this is good stuff actually. So most of the things that are happening have been demonized by media. So this is something that when me and Damian Duffy did The Whole, which is our first major graphic novel, the whole thing is about, which you probably have not seen actually, right?
Mhm.
And it's out of print. I gotta get a copy of it because it's the whole story is about, actually it's about the demonization of African religion in media.
Wow.
That's what the whole thing's about. And it's about the new religion of consumption is what we call it, the Church of the Loving System is what we call it. And so
Mhm.
yeah, and so what happens is uh the villain is White Peter because Saint Peter is the analog of Eshu Elegua in the Catholic Church because of the whole thing about him being a gatekeeper, because
Ah,
yeah, so
Peter has
yeah,
to keep
so we kind of mix it.
church.
So there's this character who's a mambo who wants to naturalize, voodoo by turning it into like a national religion. So she actually kind of like bastardizes it herself to a certain degree and sells it through media, right? Through her like media
Ah.
connections. So imagine if like Oprah Winfrey was a mambo, you know what I'm saying? Kind of is a little bit. But anyway, never mind. So
But it
um
reminds me how people are selling these like sage kits on Etsy or
that's what
something,
I'm saying.
like
Yeah, yeah. So it's
commodifying it.
but what's interesting though, and this is something to think about too, is that conjurers, like root workers, have always been like entrepreneurs too, though. You know what I'm saying? That's the thing. We're in a capitalist system, right? So it is the system that we're in, they operate in it. You're not bartering. Like, so if you're not gonna give me a goat or like a cow or something, I don't know, give me this money, because they have to survive too. It's a very
Promise me
like,
your firstborn, the tale of Rumpelstiltskin.
well, yeah, and that's what I did with the mama. When you read Mama Possum, I made her into like a hoodoo like possum lady Rumpelstiltskin because she wants a kid. Yeah, it's kind of like La Llorona as well. But
Ah,
anyway, so what's happened is like with the comics and horror and stuff, like witches, for instance, are always demonized. Folk horror is always demonized actually too. The folk magic that comes from other spaces, even like Western witches and stuff, are demonized because number one, there's also a fear of like just not just black women's sexuality and power, but also women just in general are like turned into witches. Any disagreeable woman that wants power is like, oh, you're a witch, and I'm gonna burn you. So that's first thing. The other thing is, when you add race on top of that, it becomes this intersectional conversation about power, class, sexuality, gender. It's like out the box, right? So that's another thing. So all these different things are like conflated and like projected upon Black people, right? So you look at then you get stuff like The Believers, right? Or like the movie Angel Heart, things of
Ah,
that nature, which I teach both of those, by the way, because it's like
I
really
love
interesting.
that movie. I think it's very underrated.
It's underrated, but it's also super problematic.
Very problematic. Yeah,
Oh,
like you
so
said, the
problematic.
weaving of the different elements and trying to quite get it, but not getting it because they don't understand it. So, like you said, it's othered. It's
Yes, in a
they,
very much
yeah.
and demonized in these different ways. And so what happens is like you get this ooga booga like voodoo scary kind of thing, right? Where it's like no, it's actually like these voodoo is a religion. Actually, it has rules. It has a pantheon. It has rites of passage, all this kind of stuff, right? And of course, root work is more of a practice, right?
Exactly. Hoodoo
Haven,
practitioners.
a
Yeah.
practitioner, exactly. And it's a collection of different types of spiritual, training and also things of that nature, but also with herbs and roots and things that are natural that are actually used to heal, mostly actually.
Life
Now,
everlasting. To
right,
be
like life after
all,
laughter,
yeah.
exactly, yeah. Or
My
like
mom just
sassafras.
dropped me off a big bag on Tuesday because we're isolating, and she's like, "Here you go."
Yeah. Or like sassafras,
Yeah.
or poke salad. You find these things in the woods, and this is stuff, these are ways that people who were enslaved would survive, right? And so
Mhm.
I kind of thought about that as a practice. And so then I was like, well, I was always a big fan of John Constantine,
Ah,
big
Constantine.
fan of John Constantine. And now I'm one of my good friends, he co-created John Constantine. Stephen Bassett. Yeah, I met him. He's one of my idols, and we became friends. Yeah, I know. I'm like, what? Yeah, like, we're working on a story actually right now with Nalo Hopkinson. It's called Night Comes Walking, and it's looking at Zora Neale Hurston as a paranormal investigator in the
Wow.
1950s. So it's like a historical fiction supernatural murder mystery with.
When are you writing in between being awesome?
But
How?
the thing is I'm working all the time. So, but other thing is I collaborate a lot. Because I
Mm,
realized like early on that you cannot do all this by yourself. So I collaborate a lot, and also too, how do you eat a whale? A little bit at a time. It took us 10 years to do Box of Bones, a decade,
wow.
10 years, but it's 300-page book and it's like fully illustrated and it's put out by a Black press and it's been optioned for a TV show. So it was worth it, I guess, so yeah, so you have these things, that are happening too. So I try to put as much of those Africanisms in my work as a resistant strategy, you know, to talk about I want to create like a very powerful, like mythopoetic that is very Afrocentric, So I'm like, well, who is our H.P. Lovecraft? Well, that might be Henry Dumas, maybe, Who is our H.G. Wells? It's probably Du Bois because he created the idea of the megascope, and he created, he was one of our first science fiction writers. So I'm doing like I'm doing the same thing that people that practice voodoo do. They replace. I never thought about that until now. I am doing that. I'm actually like
Yeah.
I, I'm conjuring a new mythopoetic. Yeah, I didn't think about it that way, but yes, that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm doing what the slaves did. Wow, what a revelation! Yeah, I didn't think about it until I just saw it, until I just said it.
I mean, that's beautiful and such incredible framing. Even just bringing in, like you said, the megascope. And it's
Yeah.
very Afrocentric what you're doing, especially in my culture, which you mentioned you have connections to as well. Gullah Geechee culture, we talk a lot about Sankofa, and
Mhm.
they go back and, fetch it and bring it forth and
Yep. Yeah.
bringing forth that which is useful from the past. And so all of these different elements, like you said, we're finding substitutions for it and really kind of weaving our own.
Mhm.
Wow. And I noticed you also put a lot of music references in
Yes.
your
Yeah.
work
Yeah.
as well. And you mentioned about blues, which I hadn't heard that connection before, being like this sort of way. Is it a way that we teleport between the past and the present? And
Oh
then,
yeah, you're talking about Amiri Baraka's
yeah.
science fiction story. Yeah, so it was the first time I read it, it was in Sherry Renee Thomas's beautiful collection, Dark Matter, which is like another pivotal book, it's a very pivotal book. And yeah, because essentially what she did is she was the first person to really rethink Black literature as speculative, right?
Mm,
So we're writing speculative fiction far longer than we imagined, actually,
wow.
even before science fiction was coined as a term.
Wow.
Yeah. So for instance, Of One Blood, which was written by Pauline Hopkins, was written in 1800s, I think, or like early 1900s, right? And it's about I need to don't quote me on that right now because of my head. I don't, but it was early. It was like early 1900s at least, which is about a black man who could pass. He's actually biracial and he's very white passing or whatever. He ends up finding this Ethiopian city, a mystical city that was magical, but also like technologically advanced, right? And it's a hidden city in Ethiopia.
Wow.
And then he discovers that that he's part of the royal family, that he's actually part of this city that's in Africa.
Oh,
I'm like,
wow.
that's how is that not Black
You
Panther? I'm
said
like,
1800s.
I want
Wow,
to say it's either the
that's
1800s or
incredible.
early 18 or early 1900s. Don't quote me on it, but it's like
You have to
really.
share that work with me. I noticed you put a similar storyline in Blue Hand Mojo. You had this passing potion
Oh yeah,
um,
yeah,
that she took. So that's
yeah.
interesting. Wow, of
It's a
weaving the.
passing potion, yeah, because and it's really tripped out because the reason why she passes is to just keep a job because it's during like it's
Yeah,
during. Yeah, so it's crazy. So she's already light skinned, but she actually needs to be fully white looking so she can actually pass
blonde hair. And like you talk
properly.
about the elements of trauma, but drawing
Mm.
is like meditative for
Yes,
you somehow, but also having to take moments and step away to say, this was real, this happened, this was
yes,
horrible. And you're finding a way though to introduce it to various audiences, not all of them Black, who may not otherwise come across hoodoo or different terms such as even Afrofuturism. So
right.
I'm not sure what that means to you. And I've been seeing different terminology such as futurism or Black
Yeah,
futurism. Do you want to tell us more about that? And are you
sure.
teaching those courses on that as well?
I always had like because people keep asking. I actually do have a definition. It's say read it to you. So I said that Afrofuturism is a critical making theory and process that uses speculative narratives to reimagine the past, interrogate the present, and design a future where people of the African diaspora thrive according to their own agency. And that's my definition. And I think it works because when I say critical making, I'm thinking music, dance, all the arts, essentially, right? And speculation, actually, when we talk about speculative narratives, we're really talking about anything that's considered to not be real. So like elves, so anything from like fantasy to sci-fi is considered speculative. Horror, ghosts, things of that nature. These are considered like speculative, right? And also, I always talk about like process and technology and design because design is planning, right? And so I've been really interested in speculative design. It's this idea of like designing um, narratives where you can actually create objects that actually speak to what I call liberation technologies. And that's why I teach my class. So my Afrofuturism class, their final project is they have to create a mystical or sci-fi like object or technology that speaks to the progress of Black people, right? And so people come with stuff like goggles that allow you to see, cops who are under cover, or like a mystical book that allows you to time travel, stuff like that. So it's like, but it's them really like coming up with
Mhm.
mystical solutions to actual problems that can lead to actual solving of the
Sounds
problem.
like engineering, or like I'm in health, so I'm thinking about like biomedical engineering,
Hmm.
like the
Hmm.
work that I'm doing in the biosciences, which is I do think is a space where we see less of what you're talking about. Like you mentioned a lot of the arts. And so of course I do this dance in between
Yes.
the arts, being in health and the humanities. And so I don't yet see some of the imagination, the critical making you're talking about in
Right.
health. And so, especially for those of us, which now I'm saying this to you, like you said, you had a revelation. I'm having a revelation like, wait, I may need to bring this up in different spaces when we're talking about health equity and advancing
Yes.
health equity. We need to talk about some of these things and how can we imagine health in these very critical ways that you're talking about.
Right. I mean, and I think that like opening up storytelling, changes things. Like for instance, have you seen like the graphic medicine series?
No.
Yeah, it's a whole series of like graphic novels about health.
You know all these cool people. I
Well, here's the thing. I mean, so I work in media, so it's like I have to be on top of this stuff, and then I'm always looking at things, just like the movie trailer I shared with you the other day, right? The Geechee Witch, right?
Which, yes.
Which upset me because I'm working on a Buhag story with my friend Shaquille. I was like, because really
They're
there's
not
not a
gonna
lot.
get the scoop. They're not gonna
Yeah,
get
they
it.
got the scoop, but it's like, our stories. I think our story is gonna be better, but it's just,
It is
but
gonna.
But then again, there was like a the Jim Henson comic series. They did one about the Boo Hag too, actually.
Muppets?
He has this thing called, it's not the Muppets, it's like a storytelling
I mean, but
character.
the same person.
Same
It's
person, yeah, Jim
oh,
Henson,
okay.
who was from the South, by the way.
Oh,
I think Jim Henson's from Mississippi. Yeah, he was, at least. He passed away a while ago. So yeah, so that's what I think about. To me, Afrofuturism is really about, it's a really catchy term about something that we've always done. But black speculation or black speculative culture is too much of a mouthful. Afrofuturism is kind of sexy. It's like, oh, it rolls off the tongue better, you know.
mhm.
Even Nnedi Okorafor is like African futurism. It's a really, really cool construction, but it just doesn't, it's not as catchy, you know what I'm saying? And so when Black Panther came out, people really like gravitated towards the term, right? But what's interesting though is that me and my cohort of scholars, like people like Kenitra Brooks and Ronaldo Anderson, Tiffany Barber, Stacey Robinson, Nalo Hawkinson, we were already working in that space at least a decade before it broke wide.
Ah.
Um, so because this is, and I always say this, like when hip hop happened, the academy, the academe, they just kind of poo-pooed it at first, right? It's like, I don't know what this is. What is people on there
Yeah,
sitting on their heads?
for
Right?
the uncultured. Ugh.
It's uncalled. Yeah, it's like it was beneath like their notice, right? And so really you don't even get to see your first, and I talk about this all the time. You don't really see your first hip hop scholar book. I think it's probably Black Noise by Trisha Rose, honestly. Don't you think? I mean, it's probably like the first one. And
I'm
that's the
not
90s.
sure. And I
That's the
didn't even
90s.
know other people were including, again, because you're in media, so you're more hip than I am to what's going on in popular culture.
I'm
I
not
didn't
that hip.
know as many people include all these references. So I make sure purposefully in all of my courses, and just about everything I do, I put a bunch of hip hop references.
Oh
Because I'm like,
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
sure maybe they'll pick them up, maybe people notice,
I used to
whatever.
teach
But
a whole. I designed a whole design class, like a studio based on hip hop, when I taught at University of Illinois, and I continued it at UB, and I probably taught the first Afrofuturist design course. Actually,
wow,
it was called Race as Science Fiction. I'll
that's
send you the syllabus.
incredible. That's
I mean,
incredible.
I'm thank you, but I use the classroom as like a lab. And I'm trying to figure things out, and sometimes experiments fail, and sometimes they're like, yeah, we need to do that again. Like my sunken place map project.
Mm.
So the students in my
Get
horror
out.
class, yeah. So the sunken place is a really interesting like narrative about the conflation of race and space, obviously, and spatial narratives that are like built for us to exist in. So the sunken place is across the tracks. The sunken place is, the ghetto. The second place is like it's sketchy over here, right? There's a narrative that's
Sketchy for
connected.
code that is too black over there.
Exactly,
I've
exactly.
had someone say that to me before, and I asked them, well, what do you mean? And I could tell they
Yeah,
got visibly uncomfortable because they
yeah,
really,
because you're talking about it's black, and you don't, and your body doesn't feel protected there, right? Which is what our bodies feel like every day, So yeah, so I was like, well, the sunken place is a space. How do we get there? And so if there's a way to get there, how do we get out? So they have to create a art as map project.
So, John, thank you for joining us today. Is there anything else about your work or in general that you'd like to discuss?
Well, you've checked out Ghostlight, right?
I have, of course I have.
Right. So, Ghostlight is Sankofa as a person, essentially. Yeah, even like the circle, like so that the thing in his chest, that's a Sankofa, that's an egg. That's the Sankofa egg to me, because the character is like she resurrected from the dead, brought back, and is reunited with his family, and there's actually, so it's a very like speculative black space. I look at him as kind of like a conjure man too, because his power comes from speaking to systems.
Oh, what?
Remember, like his,
It's right here across the room, and I just want to grab it because I'm like, what are you
you
talking
go
about?
grab it. You can go grab
Thank
it.
you. Give me a second. Sorry, I just had to grab this. I was
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah. So
I'm like,
so it's like for instance, so he has nanotechnology in his body that allows him to speak to systems, but to me, like the nanotech could be easily switched out with ancestral knowledge, so that kind of thing.
so is there any like Adinkra
No, I
symbols?
didn't do the Endinkra. I thought it was a
Okay,
little bit too on the nose, you know what I'm saying? So it's
gotcha.
abstract. But if you look at his costume design, first of all, it's very Afrocentric. It's based off the Jamaican flag because his family is Jamaican, which you
I
kind of,
see it now. I see it.
but because at the end they're eating oxtails and plantains, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. So
Yes.
if you look at like the throat, it looks like a three-pronged hand, like reaching down.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and after you reach and get that knowledge, you speak. So it's like it's on his, you know, under his larynx and stuff. So, the design of him is like really about like, I mean, he's a very Afrofuturist, obviously. So like, I mean, if you read it, then there's this thing called the Sweetwater Gap. First of all, Sweetwater is, I get that name from Henry Dumas's work, Goodbye Sweetwater.
Mm.
And then of course there's the Sweetwater Gap, which that date is Octavia Butler's birthday. So stuff like that. So it's like all kinds of like shout outs to ancestral folk,
Love
and
that.
even my grandmother is referenced in the book. There's actually this scene where like the Silver Surfer goes and breaks up like this riot that's happening because all these memories, these traumatic memories, are like taking over the city. And there's this woman who says her name is Shuri, like Chureiie, and so that's my grandmother's name, stuff like that. So there's a lot of shout outs to ancestors, like necronymic naming, a lot of stuff like that is happening. But yeah, but it's the whole thing is about Sankofa, it's about family, it's about community, and it's about, speaking to really like the systemic issues that I think plague us. Because most superheroes, Batman will fight the Joker one issue, then he'll fight the Penguin, and he'll fight the Riddler. I was like, dude, you're a billionaire. You should really look at the systems. Like, what is making these people, you know, right? So I created a superhero that's black, it's very black actually, that can actually imagine someone who can actually speak to a a star system and connect it to an anthill, that kind of thing. So he's a connector, right? So that's what I think. I don't think people realize like what that power actually gives him. He's what I call a systemopath. So I'm really proud of it. I hope people check it out. They probably won't because he's not Spider-Man or like Luke
What,
Cage.
Silver Surfer?
No, no, not Silver Surfer, Ghostlight. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yes, we are. This is actually on our list for our Black Comic Studies group.
Is that right?
Yes, well,
Let me
by your
know.
friend Q, you know. So
Well,
yeah.
let me know. Let me know what they say. So, I'm curious.
I'll
As I
see.
made it for us, I try to make a really black superhero, but not make it like I am black nationalist, blackity black man, so, which is totally cool,
Like,
right?
yeah.
But
Yeah,
it's just like,
your work is definitely top of the list. I think we have David Walker,
oh, that's my dude.
Ebony Flowers.
Oh,
I
I
mean,
love
literally what he
Hot
wrote
Comb.
about you. Yes, Hot Comb. Yes,
Love
yeah,
that book. It's so good.
yeah. I think The Talk is on the list.
Oh shoot, yeah, the Darren Bell book. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So
that's a
yeah, so
good.
we
I
those
just
are on
read
our
that.
list this year for our group. So and I definitely what David Walker said about you, I laughed as I was reading because I'm like, exactly, like you're jealous and you're like mad, but you're like, wow, this is really good. Like
that's
this is so good. You're like,
That's
but
why
you
I talk to David Walker like every week almost, or every other week. He's become like one of my best friends actually. It's crazy. So
I love
like,
that. You sound like a guy's guy. It's just like a people person. Like you said, like you don't do this alone. So I think that's beautiful. And you kind of embody like Afrofuturism and like our principles of Sankofa, like all of it, like Conjure Man.
I do my best to try to, because I really, one of the things that I always say is like my secret superpower is, it's not even really a secret. I really want all of us to win. That's what I want, and it's like, so I'll try to do my best to engender that, and so most of my work is collaborative, and I think one of the things that I learned, like I was watching this talk between Bell Hooks and Theaster Gates, actually. And I want to say like maybe Theaster Gates, I forgot which one of them was actually in residence at the New School in New York. I forgot who what maybe it was, I forgot which one, but they were talking. It was either Theaster or her, and I forget. Either one of them could be like in residence, right? And so they were having this conversation, and I think Bell Hooks asked him about like his education as a potter, because his back, he's an MFA. I don't know if the listeners don't know who he is, but he's from Chicago, or he's in Chicago, and he's by training a ceramicist, like a potter, makes vessels, right? And he has a master of fine arts in that, and he actually was very successful doing this, and is a world-renowned visual artist and theorist or what have you. But he also started buying up these spaces in Chicago and turning them and refurbishing them and turning them into like public spaces. Like there's a new library and stuff. Like people just love these spaces in Chicago, right? And what he said is that MFA gives you a certain type of training and thinking about the space that you're in, right? And so he said that, yeah, even though he's looking at buildings and, thinking about community differently, he's really just still doing pots. He's really still making pots, I was like making vessels. And I was like, wow. So when I started thinking about my own work, I've always just been a storyteller and a designer, you know. So when I create or co-create a space like the Schomburg Center for Black or the Black Comic Book Festival, which you got to get to one of these days, is so it's the
Invite,
largest.
date, time, location.
Yes, yeah, it's April 26th and 27th. Totally free at the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture in Harlem.
Harlem.
We do it every year. It's the 12th one actually. We started it in 2012. I've actually I'm now this year for the first time in a long time. I'm helping put it together again, and I think it brings in like about 15,000 people. It's totally free, very family oriented. All Black artists and writers, actually publishers. There's nothing like it on the planet. And so when I look at that, I'm like, oh, what I am doing really is designing, because I think to date, that particular space has serviced about 80,000 children, Black children primarily, 80,000 kids. So we're talking about a whole generation of kids who come to the Schomburg who never have to know what it's like to not be subject in a story. Because when they
Wow.
walk into that space, they are the default. For 2 days, they are the default. It is the blackest space. And we're talking about like Langston Hughes's ashes are in the foundation of this building. Like buried under a cosmogram of the river, the Negro speaks of rivers.
Wow.
That is in front of a theater that is named after Langston Hughes. We're talking about walking through the library and you see Aaron Douglas's paintings, like for real, hanging on the wall. This is a Black space.
I
It's
need to
on.
come so my powers can be activated. So
Yeah. Yeah, and it's like Malcolm X Boulevard. This is like across from the Red Rooster. It's Black. It's
blackest
crazy.
space in the world.
It's Black.
One of the
It's like
Black.
it makes McCon to be like, I don't know. And you walk in there and like, everybody looks like you. Everything is you. And everything's about empowering you.
I
And
love
we
that this is our first episode for Black History Month. Is this
oh
very
yeah.
blackety black take on the
Oh
South?
no, it's so blackety black. And it's the South, but it's also like taking that southernism into these other spaces, right? So it's a community of like Black independent comic book artists that are killing it, and they're super talented, right? And so I'm so honored that people like embraced it so much. And I was, and now I get a chance to actually organize it again. So it's in April. But I've actually put these spaces together, but so the thing of what I've done is I'm realigning Black subjectivity. Like people will know, that they can make these works too, and that they are the center of the story. And that to me is like that's healing, that's root work, that's conjure work right there.
Our
We're
stories
conjuring a new
should
future
be
from these
told.
kids. Yeah. Anyway, so that's that. So
That's incredible. So our stories should be told. That's root work. That's conjuring. I love that. It's very healing. And thank you again for sharing space with me today, and joining us, John, on Take on the South. And this is the end of an interview with John Jennings. This is Ebony Toussaint, and I'll catch you next time here on Take on the South.
That was our Take on the South. Let us know yours. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at U of SC South. Take on the South is produced by Matt Simmons of the Institute for Southern Studies. Special thanks to Professor Dave Garner of the University of South Carolina School of Music for composing our music. Tune in next time for another Take on the South.